What if burnout wasn't a problem to fix, but a signal guiding you toward deeper alignment with life? The Practice Podcast invites you to explore how aligning with your energy can transform your connection to yourself, your relationships, and your work. Through real stories, data-driven insights, and life-centered tools, each episode helps you tune into your body's signals and create life-affirming change from the inside out. Welcome to the Practice Podcast. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Practice Podcast. I'm Jessica Corbin, and I brought two of our practice members to the pod today to have a roundtable discussion, not in the traditional practice format, but more around things like energetic literacy, the regenerative movement, why people maybe are a little resistant to coming back into the language of their bodies. And let me just take a moment to introduce our people. So we have Erin Heidenreich. Say hi.
Hi.
And Erin and I have been friends for many years. And I would say we are sisters on the regenerative journey together. Adam is newer to my world, but has been a practice member and a very impactful one at that. And the reason why I invited you both into this particular conversation is because I find the way that both of your minds work is very, very oriented to depth. You both have a capacity to drop in to levels of detail that I don't find the average person is able to always see and feel. And yet I find you both very relatable and very grounded. And so that is why I love the opportunity to talk to you, because of both of your perception and your ability to see. And so let me start here. Do people often tell you that you are a deep thinker?
Yes.
Yes. And do people often tell you that you're a deep thinker?
Yeah, my wife tells me that I'm a robot sometimes.
Oh, okay.
So maybe like a deep thinking robot.
Which is ironic because we are in the practice trying to get people to move from any of that mechanistic sort of machine-oriented ways of living and working into being oriented towards this living, breathing, ever-evolving system. So my first question that I would like to pose is, why do you think people in general find coming back into the language of their bodies, not just thinking rationally and logically, but coming back into their viscera, the somatic intelligence? Why does this seem to be challenging for people? I'm just curious about. And a lot of this is your hot takes. By no means am I looking for evidence-based opinions. It's literally a hot take central here today. So what do you think?
My first reaction is that I think that throughout our lives, we've been conditioned to be separate from our bodies, to look outward for validation, and to understand how we're operating the world from other people's point of view and from the metrics of what success may be. So I would guess that coming back into your body is probably the unknown, and oftentimes the unknown is fearful. So I think
just
people are afraid to go.
We have a tendency to label the unknown as
fearful, as well. It's like change. A lot of people are afraid of change or the unknown. And yeah, I think that's a pretty. Well, what do you think? Does that feel pretty resonant to you?
It feels deeply resonant for me. How about you? Why do you think people? And because you are the male in the room, I am going to be very interested in the male perspective.
Sure.
Around why does it seem challenging for? Not that you have to speak for all men. You can speak for yourself. But if you have any insight into why is turning toward the language of the body, why does that seem like secondary to the mind's logic?
Yeah. Well, I think to answer your first question, I think sort of like post-enlightenment, we've become very detached, our minds from our bodies. We talk a lot about the mind and the body as separate entities. And we think of the mind as something that sits up here in our heads, and our bodies or our hearts are down here. And so it's just sort of like a the way that, as Erin was saying, we've been conditioned or we've been taught to think about this separation. And so it takes a minute to not be in your head and to sit with the sort of like the wholeness of the self, and to realize that there is no separation. But I guess to your second question about as perhaps from the male perspective, there is this other layer of conditioning that's very separating logic from feelings, and the idea of emoting or expressing feelings is frankly just something that we're not taught as men, or at least I wasn't. It was like just think and act. It wasn't like, oh, ask, interrogate, what's going on, sit with your feelings, maybe cry a little bit and figure out what's happening, or why did I just punch that wall? Like, let's think about these things. So you're not taught to do that, at least in my experience.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Erin, do you have any, when he shares, what are you curious about in that share? Because again, I want this to feel like I'm not the only one asking questions. We are in a group inquiry, in this pursuit. And I'll state the North Star. The North Star is, how do we become more energetically literate? Humanity, that could be the North Star, but it's a collective pursuit that we're on. I am by no means the keeper of the information. I am just a steward, one of the many, and I believe that you both are as well. When Adam talks about men thinking and acting, I didn't hear a think, feel, and act. It's like it's a whole, section that's dropped. What comes? Is there like a secondary question that emerges through you around that?
Well, I'll say first, what I feel is like such a sense of relief when you as a man are speaking about such subjects. I'm like, oh, yes. Thank you. More of this, more of this. Like, that's my first reaction. Is just like, okay, it's just it's so nourishing to hear this from someone in your vessel of a body. And then I guess a question that might come to mind is something along the lines of, I always want to change the world, but like, how can we, like, steward a way to allow men to feel more open to feeling? What's preventing that from happening? I don't know. Again, speaking on behalf of all men.
Come on, guys, jump on my back.
But I'll say one more thing. Sorry, is because we were just chatting before. Is that so? And I don't know the stats, but I've heard that this exists. That the numbers of people who are going to therapy, that are going on retreats, going to, working on self, awareness and transformation, reading the books, buying the books, the vast majority, from what I understand, are women. And, let's bring the men along too. Like, how, what are your takes on this?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I think that here where we are in LA, there's probably more men who are more open to a deeper level of connection with themselves. I look at California, Southern California in general, as a place where we're, you come here to explore, you come here to be free. There's just sort of like a different frequency here than like where I grew up on the East Coast. So I think being around sort of there's a different vibe here.
Would you say it's more permissive?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's just a much wider breadth of people here, where like on the so-called extreme, people just being wild and free, you're like, oh wow, you can do that out here? Cool. Well, then I can move a little bit this way. I can open up a little bit. And I've always personally just been curious. I've tried to cultivate a growth mindset, and I wanted to learn from people. And as we were discussing earlier, just sort of like putting myself in somebody else's shoes and being like, well, why does that person think the way they think? That's newer for me. I'm like, instead of just reacting to them. But and there are definitely some of my role models. Rich Roll has an amazing podcast that he brings people in from all walks of life. And he's somebody who is digging super deep into these questions. Scott Galloway, Ryan Holiday. These are some thought leaders that I look to. So I think that there is this. There are now men who are on the leading edge, who are sort of like trying to tell the rest of us it's safe to open up, and just sort of taking that step. You realize how good it is for you, and how you get that positive feedback. And so the more you open up, the more vulnerable you are, the better it is for those around you and for yourself. So I don't know if that answered your question. I sort of rambled.
Perfect vulnerability is perfect protection. I didn't come up with that phrase, but that is a phrase that exists somewhere in the ether here in LA, and I've heard it many times. Perfect vulnerability is perfect protection, and that's such an interesting thing to try on, because a lot of times women are not vulnerable because they are protecting something. They're protecting an identity of some kind. If I show you this, then it's going to crack that. It's going to crack your belief in me. It's going to make me appear weak or unreliable or whatever. And there's just been something that has been so freeing about coming back to that phrase. Perfect vulnerability is perfect protection. Of course, audit the room you're in. Don't have to go full bore with all your vulnerability in spaces by which you do not know the people. Start with real trusted spaces. But you start to realize, oh, I am most protected when I am most honest. And this is something about energetic literacy that I just keep circling back on, and I just can't help it, which is I feel energetic literacy is helping people get honest. And that honesty is helping them live more authentic lives. When we really understand how life is communicating to us and through us by reading the signals of the body, we, for better or worse, have to kind of get on board with, I don't know what to call it, our higher self, our soul, our dharma. But it's just like, it just gets really, your bumper lanes, as you become more energetically literate, the byproduct is that your bumper lanes, they start to really hone in. You can't lie to yourself the way that you used to in the past once you learn this language. And it also reduces so much suffering. But it doesn't mean that it's not uncomfortable. Being energetically literate is at times also very disruptive and very uncomfortable. We've had conversations in our respective conversations that both of you actually found yourself in a similar place, which was speaking something honestly to someone. This was the commitment. This was the energetically literate action that you had to take in order to unkink the hose. And so, what would you have to say to that? The more you get connected to your body, are you finding that you are becoming a more honest, authentic person?
What do you think, Erin?
Yes, is the short answer. And I'll also share this this quote that I read from Young Pueblo, his Instagram handle. It's something like, being honest with yourself is the highest form of self-love.
Yes.
And I have that right up on my desk, and I read it all the time, and I'm playing with it. And I'm like, okay, let's just be honest with myself first. And if I am, like, does that feel loving? And it is.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
A long time ago, I had this vision and ideal of wanting to live a really aligned life.
Yeah.
And as much as I could, what I do on a daily basis, who my friends are, the kind of work I'm doing, how I'm treating my body. And and to get aligned, you have to be honest. And that's what I think these tools do. It's like another way to be like, okay, let's be honest today. How am I actually feeling? It's saying recover day, even though I had all these other plans.
Right.
How can I be more in integrity with myself? And it feels right. Like I want to live an authentic life. And there's that book. I think it's called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. Have you heard of this book? Something like they have the top 5 regrets of the dying. And I think the top, 5, 4, 3, 2 are along the lines, I wish I would have spent more time with my family, with my friends, less time working, things like that. But I think the number one regret, and this was written by, I believe, a hospice nurse, she said it was something along the lines of people not living a life authentic to who they are, not having the courage to live a life authentic to who they are. And that sends chills through me because it feels very, I can relate to that. That's the life I want to live. And so I forget the question. So
I love it. No, I love where you're taking us.
Yeah, I feel like this is the work of my lifetime, is to figure out who I am, to love who I am, and to be in alignment in all the things that I do.
And using the data of your daily HRV assessment is something that, if you're open to it, can be a bit of a wake-up call that puts the honesty right in front of you. And you have to, in my experience, you have to want the authenticity. You have to be open to it. Sometimes it sort of happens to you. You're getting all this information all the time. You have to be open to it. And so there is this aspect. We were talking a little bit before, Jess, about the idea of opening your eyes and truly reading the data and saying, like, okay, as you were just saying, Erin, like, I have a recover day. What does that mean? Why is my instinct to be like, why do I have this? What's going on? Like, there's no running from that. But you also have to be willing to look it dead in the eye, because it can be there. But I also don't think that you come to this work without sort of opening up. There's like a little opening that you have. And if you get in and start to have a conversation with yourself, with the data that your HRV assessment is giving, it's this sort of, the boulder starts to kind of roll downhill. It just becomes easier. You become more open. You become more inquisitive, and finding that, being open to receiving that authenticity as well from yourself and from others. It's all sort of this like self-fulfilling, you get the flywheel effect.
Exactly. And that's what regenerative is. Regenerative is about creating conditions conducive for life by which the flywheel effect happens on its own. And so it's always about being kind of like this cosmic gardener of your own life, and just being, and it all can be used, all of all the shit is just fertilizer, and it can all be used. I always say this, I don't know why this phrase came to me when I was in a bit of a trash compactor of a chapter in my life, but it was like, it's all for the clearing. It's all for the clearing. Like all of it can be used. And then it's like, once you occupy that headspace, all of life's bumps and challenges, it's never for naught. It's never for naught, because we are in a chrysalis, as a society right now, as a global body right now. We're in a chrysalis, and, we are the imaginal cells, hopefully. You guys know what imaginal cells are? We're like on a cellular level, we are the ones carrying information that's then informing the other cells by which of how to, I don't know what the actual biological phrasing is, but transform shape. It's like there are certain people that kind of get the biological metamorphosis cues a little bit before others. And I think that there and this isn't it is not a better than thing. It's not a better than, less than. It's about understanding your function in the greater organism.
Mhm.
We all have to understand that we
Yeah.
have a very unique and different function in this greater organism.
Mhm.
And everybody needs to be respected for their function. I want to light people up about being curious about what their
Mhm.
function is
Mhm.
in this new paradigm, this living system paradigm. Okay, so that was my
You do, by the way. I think
Okay.
you do light up people
okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
in
no,
a
for
really
sure.
beautiful way.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I think at least in my brief experience of knowing you, you've helped me tune in to that aspect of myself that I kind of felt but couldn't necessarily put my finger on it.
Mhm.
And you're right. I mean, there is this aspect of in our culture, there's an aspect of competition. There's this aspect of I've actually been thinking a lot recently that it's about like, why do we have something to prove? Right? It's
I
like
like that.
almost on some level, we're trying to justify our own existence because we didn't create ourselves. So instead of just what I think the highest order would be just like a natural loving of ourselves just for having been created. Instead, we're like justifying our very creation because it's out of our hands. So we've created all of these things from religion to politics to even like why do I constantly even now at 43 years old look at my parents and like, are you guys proud of me? You know, like we're like constantly having to justify instead of just loving ourselves for being here and tuning in to go back to what you were saying. You tune in to say, well, what is my place here? What do the people around me need from me? And just being open and being willing to listen to that. So you have helped me even in the short time that I've known you kind of tune in or to that aspect of myself. So thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that reflection. I appreciate it. Yeah. I feel very I had this experience when I was really, really young at Epcot Center. Do you guys remember Epcot Center? It's like in Florida. Of
course.
Okay. And I don't even, I think I was like 7 years old and we were at Epcot Center and we go into some experience by which I don't know if this is true, but this is what I remember happening is that it was like a spaceship and it was a bunch of cells talking to each other about being a part of a big body. And like this little teeny tiny cell was talking about being a part of this big body. And it made me, gave me a profound aha at like 7 that was like, oh, I keep doing that. I'm a single cell on this global body called Earth, and it is a living, breathing thing. And I have a unique function, and it's just stayed with me ever since. And it has, but I forgot it. I fell asleep somewhere midlife.
Yeah.
I forgot that I had this awareness when I was really young, which of course, this is what happens. We have profound understandings when we're young that then we get conditioned out of that understanding and then you come back into it. And I had to, Saturn returns hit me like a freight train and it reestablished that inner knowing in myself. And so, yes, I really encourage everybody to kind of find out what their unique function is in this global body. And when I talk about global body, I am including our home, the mother, the earth. Like she is our home. We sprouted from her. Everybody thinks that we sprouted from like the heavens ish. We also, we sprouted from the earth, just like the moss did, you know? Like our DNA is anchored in this being. She is alive.
Well, if you take it even further back and you think about the true genesis of the universe and sort of matter and energy as such, it was nothing, then something. And everything that we're made of was in that something. So we're all connected. So like my matter and my energy is you and everybody around us in all of nature and buildings. Everything was part of this one thing. And we've gotten so disconnected from that. It's all about, what do I need to buy, and who's on Instagram that I need to impress, and we've just what are the politics today? Like, we've just totally forgotten about the true universal connection of energy and matter.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, because we are made of stardust. You'll hear that phrase too. It's like our very being is also made of the stars, which of course the earth is one of those things. But it's, we're sitting here with a grade A storyteller, Adam. I don't know if you know this.
Grade A.
Grade
You're
A.
feeding 17-year-old high school, Erin. I appreciate that. And I'll be down on myself for not getting an A+, but of course, let's go on.
But established, director, filmmaker, documentarian. And what is the story? Storytelling is so important. Because as Adam was just pointing out, like, we started to get sold a story about consumerism that separated us from our home, separated us from each other. We could go into all of the reasons for why that happened, but we don't have that time today. I want to know, though, what is the storyteller's function now?
Oh, I love this. Well, I don't know about the storyteller's function. I'll talk about what I find really important. And it's something that I've kind of like changed with what I've been attracted to in terms of the stories I'm telling, which is when we're thinking about the future. Most of the movies and TV shows out there that talk about the future are dystopian. It's all so negative. It's all terrible. It's all, and of course, if we're all seeing these same stories, and those are the experiences we're having, we're getting connected to these characters, and we're feeling their feelings, like, we're going to live into that. We just are on some level. And so I've been really attracted to, and one word that's being thrown around is this idea of protopian storytelling. So not utopian, where everything is Pollyanna perfect, but like into another direction. It doesn't have to be dystopian, and I think, I see to myself, or any conversations I'm sure you have with your friends, if you talk about politics or the climate crisis or anything else, there's this acceptance of like, yeah, it's all going to shit. Yeah, it's all going to be terrible. We're all going to die anyway. And that's the, whole thing that's like, we're just giving up in a lot of, at least the circles I'm connected with. And that's where I find storytelling needs to really sort of start to shift, is to, again, not fake stories about the future. It's all imaginary, but really, finding new ways to talk about how can we live into a space that is maybe showing characters and people more interconnected with the natural systems, maybe more in right relationship with the natural systems. Because, you're exactly right. We've created this huge separation where we look at not only ourselves as humans as separate from nature, but also like better than, right? And so we just extract and we like pillage and do whatever we want with the earth and, and all that. But we know it's not working on some fundamental level, wherever you are in terms of your personal journey into being in connection with, the earth or with, nature, the, ecology of the world. I think we all know, almost anybody, like something feels off in terms of that. And we're seeing the effects of that every day. And so I feel, as a storyteller, being able to not only tell stories that give us another path, another way to sort of view the world, to organize things in our meaning-making brains, but also have a felt experience of what that could be like. Because I think in our bodies, we know when things feel aligned, even if we don't have the language yet. That's why so many people, when they go into nature, right, they just feel more relaxed, maybe a little bit lighter, maybe a little bit more grounded. And stories, especially through emotional storytelling, can also bring about those feelings.
And how has the regenerative movement started to inform the way you want to tell stories?
Good question. Well, first I will divulge that I'm working on a documentary about the regenerative movement. And so with that, but then with others is on a more practical level is just like, okay, how are we treating ourselves behind the camera? The whole thing feeding into it. Like I've always believed for a long time that how we are behind the camera, and specifically because I mostly have done documentaries, and how we act and behave and feel behind the camera is going to directly impact how you feel, how we feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if our cameraman right now was making angry faces at us and everything, like we'd have a different experience.
He's very handsome.
Yeah. But it's the whole process, I think, of how we're going about making a production and how can that be as regenerative as possible in terms of feeding all of us humans that are part of the natural world and in the creation of the actual project.
Mm.
Is that making sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes, it does. And you took it into another direction than I was initially feeling the question. And I see it's 100%. That's why regenerative sometimes, and I don't know how much time you've spent. Let me ask you. Before Source, had you heard of the regenerative movement? And if so, what was that exposure?
Yeah. So I work in the coffee industry, and it is now regenerative farming is the new sustainable. You're going to start seeing on your coffee bags regenerative. So we've come to a place in my industry where we've realized that the extractive model, the sort of like factory farm model is not working. We are killing the soil and the communities that provide the product that almost a billion people consume every day. And so that's been my experience, is seeing the damage that has been done through sort of traditional, colonial, post-colonial, capitalist extraction, the othering of natural resources from what humans need and want and just get to do with the earth. We're seeing, and obviously with the greater climate crisis, we're seeing that model doesn't work anymore, and we need to do something about it. And so, yeah, at least in my industry, there's a move towards supporting coffee producers and just folks throughout the supply chain to have a more regenerative model, maybe a smaller footprint, helping folks not just monocrop planting coffee, but, planting beans and citrus and other products within, or other agricultural products within their farming enterprise. And so, yeah, that's how I come to it. And it's interesting. When you tune in, these things kind of happen in waves, right? Like I didn't expect to join the practice. It kind of came out of nowhere. And then seeing the word regenerative in the regenerative movement and reading a little bit about it was like, oh, yeah, this is happening for a reason. I've seen this. Here we are. Let's go.
And I think I'm also aware that, like, I don't want, regenerative to just turn into another type of greenwashing.
Yeah,
it's like it really, and this is why I'm so passionate about the practices, because this has to be lived.
Mm-hmm.
This has to be lived, and it always starts with how we are managing our own, energetic supply, how we're cycling in our own energy, and to the degree that we can cycle it appropriately and let that rip out into our relationships and then ripple out into our work environments will determine, our ability to have positive impact. But if we leave ourselves behind, and this is what has been happening, and this is why the human energy crisis exists, is because we've been so externally focused. We have so many bleeding hearts that want to do good, and they are justifying leaving themselves behind over and over and over again, meaning they will not resource themselves when something outside of them is, needing what they would see it as their care. And this is probably the hardest for me and for anybody that is like a helper profile, which I would assume both of you are. Um, when you have to turn the tide and go, oh my God, because there's always so much need that's amplified outside of us. And yet we are out of integrity in the regenerative movement if we keep extracting from ourselves faster than we can repair for somebody else's gain.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a particular edge that it brings up and has brought up for me that I've had to reconcile again and again and again. Meaning when I see my data taking that hit, even if there's something outside that needs my care, I have to understand I am a part of the whole. And my responsibility is to my vessel so that I can, from the overflow, from the regenerative effect, then positively influence. It is not a strategy anymore to leave myself behind.
Yeah.
Have you experienced this edge yet in this
I
process?
have. I mean, I will say it is a disruption.
No.
It is a big disruption.
Jeez.
Because as you're talking about that, I'm like, the programming is so strong in me to go for everybody else, and so strong to give and give. And also, look, to give myself and all of us a break, it's like our whole society is built around this. It's like we're getting emails and calls and texts to do this and this and this at any time, day or night. But to be able to be like, no, my energy level is, what would be the words? This is kind of foreign to me. My energy level is more important than that.
I need to keep myself resourced. I am a part of the whole. So again, back to like using the metaphor of we're single cells in a global body. And all we really have dominion over is our vessel. Yeah. If I want to influence the global body for the good, then I have to start here. Otherwise, this is going to turn cancerous.
Yep.
And then that is going to, again, inform all the circles around me that that's okay. And then that, starts to metastasize. Self-abandonment metastasizes. Fuck.
Well, and that's where we are, I think.
That's a great phrase.
It's like we are living in a society of metastasized cancer where everyone, in order to justify their existence, has to continually be on and prove themselves and be selfless. If you tend to yourself, you're told you're selfish. If you do something, an act of kindness and generosity for yourself before somebody else, you are selfish, and that equates with bad. You need to be for the others. But it's like, wait a minute. In order for me to be the best version of myself for you and everyone else, I have to tend to myself. And it's scary to do that too. So it's this double-edged sword of like, not only are you told that you're selfish for taking care of yourself, it's scary. It's uncomfortable to do that when you have to like shine the mirror onto yourself and stop going out and doing things for others at a mile a minute and just sitting down, being quiet, looking at yourself. That's scary. That's why a lot of people don't do it. And so being on that like leading edge of saying, no, I'm going to be selfish. I recently, not recently, like 18 months ago, I left a company that I co-founded, and I was told I was very selfish for doing that. And maybe I am. Maybe I was selfish, but I needed that in order to be a better version of myself down the line. And, there are ramifications that I'm experiencing because of that, but it is what it is. Like, I think that we have to take self-care seriously, because Erin, like you were talking about, if you bring a certain energy to a project that you're working on, and you're not taking care of yourself, your energy is going to bleed into the entire project. And what you're trying to capture is going to be tinged with this sort of like, is going to be colored by your depleted energy.
And I see what you're saying, because it's also like I've had those intentions the last few years or so, but the edge becomes when like the pressure turns up, right? Like when, you have to make those really tough decisions. Like I'm getting up in the morning and I know there's like really important emails I should be responding to, but usually morning is the best and only time for me to exercise. And so really just even though those really subtle little choices, that's, I feel like, where the rubber really hits the road, because I can intellectualize and tell you exactly what we should all be doing, how we should be doing that. But it's like really in our daily actions. And I think, yes, there's what the outside world is saying, but for me, for a lot of my life, it's like, it's so deeply within myself that there's a lock on this programming that even though nobody else knows, like I remember there was a long time there where I would not let myself like go to yoga until I had certain things done, even if nobody else is really going to know or really going to care. And I was just hurting myself. But I'll also say that when I did start to make that shift, when I did start to, and I'm still, finding my way, when I did start to realize I need to fuel myself up, and I start to realize, oh, this feels kind of good. And I kind of like this. And it feels alive. And a big life decision I made, which you know about, is I moved out to the woods. I live now more closely connected with nature. And I'm hearing the birds and I'm seeing the trees, and just like all these little shifts of me starting to feel a little bit calmer in my nervous system and knowing myself a little bit better and understanding what feeling like alive and present and joyful and full of vitality feels like. It's harder now, because now I've started to already go over that. It's harder now to turn that off, or I'm more aware of it. When I just had a production and it kind of got scraped thin again, it was like, I don't want to live like this. I've seen the light just a little bit, and you really just want to be in that, and I think that becomes scary if we talk about disruption, because then it becomes about, okay, the choice point of action. Sometimes like it might come down to me for even tomorrow with this phone call I have. Am I willing to walk away from a job, from payment, because they don't want to live into this new framework, this semi-alternative way of doing this production?
This is where the rubber is meeting the road in a way that at source we are in consistent inquiry of as well. Money.
Yeah.
Regenerative ways of living don't always track with the current dominant system. And it's like, then, where it takes us? Into a space of like redefining value. So, of course, we need enough to get by. But because I've had the good fortune to make a lot of money at certain points in my life and really understand that it didn't make me any happier. Like, I need enough to like live and have everything paid for. But there gets to be a certain type of wealth where it's like, it's actually not making me any happier. So we need enough money to be able to survive, to do the work that we love. But then beyond that, what's truly valuable? More money or more freedom to create, to have the environments that allow your creativity to really come through, or the environments that allow you to deeply connect. The environments really, really matter. And when I talk about environments, I'm also talking about the people that fund the projects, where the money is coming from, because that's something that we've had to, make really hard decisions at source, is like, we can't take capital that's hooked into old game metrics of acceleration, because that will burn the company out, and then we become a actual hypocrite of what we're trying to solve. So we can't do that. But how is it affecting? I'm just wondering, we can speak of our ideals and of all of our insight. Let's do a quick round of like, but how is that affecting your ability to provide financially and your ability to make money? Like, is doing things in a regenerative way financially viable?
Best question
Yeah.
yet.
I would say it depends on the aperture that you're using. So for me personally, right now, at this point in time, it's not. I didn't leave I left a lucrative job to start a business that was not lucrative and became very emotionally draining, physically draining. And I was not going down the path that I wanted to be going down. So I left. That is still emotionally, physically, and financially draining. But if I widen the aperture, I am very confident that over time, that decision to step into a regenerative way of being will be financially viable for me. I am very blessed. I'm grateful that my wife has a wonderful job. She is supporting our family and has been doing so for the last 6 years since I started this. I don't like to call it a failed entrepreneurial venture because I learned a ton. So it wasn't, I mean, I guess like if you look at the traditional sense, sure, it's failure. But we don't look at things from a traditional sense. So I think getting out of this idea that everything has to go up and to the right infinitely, if you take the long view on it and you can open yourself up to new opportunities. And again, I'm very blessed to be able to do that. And my wife giving me the time to find what that next sort of like financial reward will be. It will be. If I can just sit in that space and like be okay with it. And it took me a while. I was like, as soon as I left, I started, created a spreadsheet and started documenting my time and having coffees and interviews with people. I gotta go make money. And it's like, okay, figure your shit out first. And then the infinite abundance will come. So I am not currently making money, but I am confident that something will come along that will make that possible.
In a regenerative way.
In a regenerative way, on the terms that I know are the right terms, and that like I can find people who also believe in that, whether it's from a financial from a financing perspective, if I want to start another company, or from people who will hire me on the term like you're talking about. Okay, do you want to hire me? Cool. I have these skills and here's what I want to do. Here's how I want to do it. We can negotiate around stuff, but there's certain like non-negotiables that I know will make me better for you. So let's talk about that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Erin, do you think regenerative is a financially viable model?
I'm living that question right now, like in the deepest sense, in that, as I mentioned before, the way I was working wasn't allowing me to live fully. So I had to do something different. I'm living into the regenerative way more. To figure out if it's financially viable is what I'm finding out like right now. As you probably know, like in LA, the filmmaking industry, specifically production, is really at a dismal place. So much of it has left LA. It is in Vancouver, Atlanta, Eastern Europe, and there are so many people unemployed who have not worked in a long time. There are a lot of people who are, just having to get out of the film business in order to find ways to provide for themselves and their families. And so I'm also I'm not just like optimistic, but I'm also like, I feel that the world is changing. I do feel it is. There are more people, I think, coming into my circles that do care about this regenerative way of living. I'm hopeful that to be able to continue in this film industry, that I will be able to connect with more people who will want to finance in a way where we don't have to necessarily, work 16 hours a day in order to be compensated for our work. But it is rough right now. It is definitely rough. And it is a really interesting space for me personally, whereas like I've grown into this place where I care more about my body and my aliveness and being available to all parts of my life, to my friends, to my family, to being able to exercise and be in nature. Those are all so vitally important to me, as is work. And I'm a freelance artist with no spousal or familial support. So it's but there's part of me that's like, of course I set myself up in this way. Like, of course I did, so that I have to find out, can I really be in true alignment and be taken care of financially? So I don't know the answer truly, but I'm choosing into it, and let's check back in a year and see what's up.
I know. This is really the question that I think many people in the regenerative movement are spending a lot of time considering, because the fact of the matter is, my one of my teachers, Laura Storm, she said it perfectly, which is, we are swapping the engine while the plane is in flight.
Right.
Like, that's what we're
Yes.
doing. So here's how I see it, guys. Here's how I see it. It's like, you're Melissa, my Andy. You are doing both at the same time, which I don't even know how you're doing it. But there's like some people that are actually flying the plane, and there's other people that are swapping the engine. The people that can swap the engine need to be dedicating their time to swapping the engine. And a lot of times, having the dual income house where you have, very passionate, forward-thinking people that can hunker down and swap the engine so that everything doesn't crash, then we can get to our destination. Now, when you're a single provider for self, I also want to just speak grace into the conversation, which is, we're still going to probably have to take the jobs that sometimes isn't meeting the mark. But like, you will still foster this relationship with self that will create ripple effects into every environment that you're in. So it's not that these, jobs have to always hit every ideal, in the regenerative framework. As long as you are staying in as much energetic integrity as you can while still providing, is all that's needed. It's all that's really needed at this point in time. And then as your influence, rises, then, hey, you can make more demands.
Mm-hmm.
You can make more demands. But
there's also like, in practicality though, whenever I do speak about these ideas and the regenerative way or movement or, living, which is new for so many people, like most people, like, they're like, yes, that sounds great. Or they're like, hell no, that doesn't work for me. But those people I'm not really working with anymore, just by the way things have, flowed through my professional career. So, and I also just want to speak to the idea of like community.
Yeah, let's talk about
it. That to me, and even in the practice, even in this like, WhatsApp group and the calls we do and in my, other communities that like overlap in some ways, it's like that has become such a source of aliveness for me as well. Mm-hmm. Because as because there's not one person flying one plane of the human, species, right? I don't know what that, metaphor is then. I love that metaphor about the swapping, but it is like a lot of different pilots, a lot of people. And so it's like, for me, one of my biggest learnings has been that I need to, it's so cliched, but like learning how to ask for help which is like the hardest thing in the world for me. And I also think that's why I got the flu for a few weeks and during a blizzard when I had no groceries in my house and had to ask people to come out and bring me food so I could survive. That is part of the growing organism or the global body. I said it is like, I need to lean on you a little bit now, and I need to figure out how to be able to ask you for things. And, because I think all of us and most people are willing to like stand up and like give the help, but the being the vulnerable is also part of that organism.
Yeah. Coming back to that again, started with vulnerability, ending with it. It's so important in this work. Do you guys have anything final that you would want to share? I'm so grateful for the time that you've extended and letting me and other people into your lives. Is there anything else that you feel like wants to be spoken before we wrap? It could be a dad joke. I mean, it doesn't have to be.
One thing I don't know. It came up for me before.
Okay, great.
And then we kind of shifted. So I'm not sure if it's relevant, but let me see if I can get into words. Because I think you were speaking about this before, Adam, is that to even get into these places, like you have to have this willingness to want to know yourself. I'm saying that, sort of paraphrasing in some ways. And I have found that because I kept hearing about self-love for years. And I was like, what, I get it, but how and what is that, whatever. And I think I've started to figure out that it's like a feedback loop between knowing yourself and self-love. That it's like, you have to kind of be willing to jump into one end or the other. But if you jump in a little bit to like wanting to know yourself, you know yourself a little bit more, then you're able to bring more love and compassion to some of those pieces that maybe you used to, look down upon or push away. And then the more you're bringing self-love into it, allows you to even know yourself even more. And it just like deepens in this sort of like feedback loop. And to me, that's been helpful in this regenerative process.
I think I haven't heard it put that way before, but it makes all the sense in the world that self-understanding actually comes maybe first. Then you layer on the self-love for the integration, aspect of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think and they keep going back to each other. And then they just keep
going back and forth. Yeah.
Well, and I would also add to that as you noted, Erin, we're not doing this alone. And so part of this is, how do we do this in community? And how do we spread the message? Not in like an evangelical kind of way, but like, hey, this has been really powerful for me. What is your experience like? And when you have that flywheel effect of the self-exploration and the self-love, you want to share that with people and, share it with people close to you, but also what you're doing with the practice and putting like-minded people together, and even in this WhatsApp group and on the community calls, is an ability to kind of feel into that and spread, and you create this organic growth of self-inquiry and self-love. And then sort of like that happens in a community. You connect with people. The more you connect, the more you want to do it, the more you want to share. So I think that's how this idea gets spread.
Yay.
Couldn't say it better myself, so I won't. Thank you both for coming and sharing your thoughts and your hearts. I appreciate it. And thank you guys. We will see you next time.